32. Welcome, everyone, to Dark Loops Productions Shogun Watch Party. I'm Dr. Scott Jordan, aka Zombie Scotty, cognitive psychologist, philosopher at Illinois State University. Tonight, we come together to discuss episode 2, Servants of Two Masters. Members of the Shogun Watch Party, please introduce yourselves, and we'll start with Rio.
Absolutely. My name is Rio Shigeta. I am an actor, entertainer, man of many faces, man of three hearts, and also engaged to Kristen here with us today, and older brother to Tatsu, and friend to all. That's me.
Well, I think people watching this podcast are going to have to get one of those family tree illustrations so they can realize
We'll talk about the Shogun website. Yeah.
Exactly. How about you, Maisha?
Hi everyone, I'm Maisha. I am currently a PhD student at University of Utah, and I am here with the crew to talk about Shogun because I am a pop culture enthusiast, and anything that has pop culture in it, I try to be there for that reason.
Well, we are glad you're here. We won't tell everybody exactly where you are. What we will say is that you're 12 hours different than we are, and we very much appreciate your contributions and your commitment. How about you, Tatsu?
Thank you.
Oh, you're more than welcome.
Dr. Tatsu Shigeta. I'm a cognitive neuroscientist turned manager of customer success managers, casual anime watcher. I would say that unlike Toranaga, I am into beautiful women and I'm engaged to one as well.
He sure is.
Boy, is that dude's just got skill. Just got skill. I mean, of course, I'm talking about Tatsu here right now. I was never into beautiful women. Just what a sexy line. Can I say that that's actually a sexy line? It's just brilliant. It's poetic. Okay, exactly. And how about you, Kristen?
Hi, yes, I'm Kristen Farrell. I am engaged to Rio Shigeta, soon to be sister-in-law to Tatsu Shigeta. I am a Pure fitness instructor and realtor in Chicago. Also a performer, singer, dancer, actor, all the above.
Well, we're very glad you're here. And go ahead.
So do we call you Kristen no Kata once you guys get married?
Yeah. And who? Make sure. Because the relationship language is very precise. So
I am an old lady, so please give me some respect before I
die. and you say to that, you will address me as Kristen Sama.
That's right.
So what does it mean, Kristen Sama?
It is an honorific to someone much higher in rank than you, someone who is superior to you, in more ways than one.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
S-A-M-A.
Wasn't this? Did we talk
authority
about this last
or even
time?
godlike? Yeah.
Was this like it came about with like the feudal system, right? And then San was. Oh no, I saw this on a YouTube on a reel on Instagram. And San, that honorific was developed afterwards because they weren't quite as it still needed respect, but not quite as much respect as the lords. And yeah. Ooh.
No, it's awesome.
You're learning.
My doom scrolling meant something today.
Well, on the one hand, we're laughing. On the other hand, I can't tell you how many different websites I went to today because of this episode, just for many different reasons. First thing I want to say is FX has an amazing webpage. It'll give you images of the layout. It'll give you a family tree. And, we'll talk about other things that happened in this episode to the point where I was in Google Scholar today looking for scholarly papers on Japanese history, simply because I wanted to understand a line. So when I talk about my favorite line, I'll tell you why it drove me to Google Scholar and why I actually printed a 40-page paper. And that's just something about the multimedia environment, right? I mean, all these things are possible that weren't possible 20 years ago. It's just fantastic. That's a comment if you guys want to talk about that at all.
I mean, yeah, if I'm being completely honest, I'm looking at it right now, and there's just so much to parse through. It's really helpful. Kind of like and the show gets compared to it a lot. When Game of Thrones in the front of the book has like the family lineages, I think it's in the back actually, with all of the characters and all of their relationships to all the families, and then the maps in the front. It's like that, but for this show.
Well, there's other parallels with Game of Thrones because this show has 100% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, and so did Game of Thrones. And I don't know if Game of Thrones got that for the entire run or just particular seasons, but it also feels like a lot of Game of Thrones going on here. A lot of amazing writing, acting, and editing that has the same level of intrigue as Game of Thrones had, and it was good.
I was gonna say that intro isn't unique. Never. Go ahead, Krista.
No,
no, the intro definitely not. I watched a video on that too. But I was gonna say that I will say the difference for me is that this hooked me right away, and with the other show that I shall not name that we've been talking about just now, I've watched the first 7 episodes at least 4 times, and I have never finished. Just never got into it. So this one pulled me in right away.
Well, this one
had
doesn't
too many
have
characters.
This one doesn't have the violence and sex pandering that
I think that's
the Game
part
of Thrones did. I mean, it's not like I didn't watch it, but yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly.
The difference also being that I know this is a dramatization, but we know how much work went into the authenticity and trying to be respectful and accurate in terms of the environment, the costuming, the language, and so on. So this is as accurate a representation as this production was able to represent. Whereas Game of Thrones, yes, we're basing it on George R.R. Martin's series of books. This is fantasy. I know that a lot of it is, based in sort of medieval European culture and as well as Scandinavian and others as well, but it's fictional. So it can be as, extravagant and visually spectacular as we want it to be. Whereas this, we're leaning more on, accurate representation of the period of time, of the art of the time, of the culture. And that is actually that breathtakingly beautiful and somber and violent and awe-inspiring.
Yeah.
And this is based on in my opinion, middling, if not slightly better book that is based in history, but not historically accurate. So my vote goes to Shogun in terms of the comparison of the two and the similarities, the sort of like war and politics of it, I think are the more Western part of the show. And what appeals to me more is the view into and the sort of immersion into the Eastern culture and environment.
Well, on that note, go ahead, please.
I was just gonna say there's so many more layers to what's being said. There's always a meaning behind a meaning behind a meaning in the show. So I feel like you got some interesting plots in Game of Thrones, but you don't get this level of detail and attention.
I'm going to politely demand that you have them executed.
Yes.
Politely.
Yes, politely. So many layers.
Yeah, I love it. So, on that note, who would like to begin with favorite line, favorite scene, favorite character?
Well,
that sounds like Rio wants to go.
I feel like I always go first because I always have the most to say. So I think we'll talk a little bit more about sort of the title and why I think it's so fun. But we were just talking about sort of the veiled meaning to the words and reactions and so on. And one of my favorite ones from this last episode, it's Ishido and Yabushige, and they're talking. Did I take yours, Kristen?
It's okay. I have another one. So I have 2 favorites. That was my other one.
I have a backup too, just in case.
When you go
And
first, you don't need a backup.
exactly.
Hey, that's a
I'll
t-shirt.
probably talk about my backup too anyway.
When you do it right, you don't have to come back.
so they're discussing. So there's a whole thing about how Yabushige was I think a soldier under Ishido, who was a general in the Korean War. And they are sort of allies now, still secretly. And they're sort of plotting about what to do with Blackthorn, but also, Ishido's like staring out at the Taiko's castle, and he's talking about how, when the Taiko built that castle, all of the lords in the region gave the Taiko their best stones, and he chose mine as the cornerstone of that castle, and then he rewarded me with a seat on his council, and Yabashige just is nodding along. And he says, "It's a nice stone." Like, it is the samurai equivalent of cool story, bro, but done in such a way that it doesn't disrespect his superior. It's incredible how much subtext you can put into just say what you're not saying, right?
We laughed out loud.
Yeah.
I mean, the actor's great too, so
that's all. I mean, before that whole scene too, right? As just before Ishido's walking in, you see him just like trying to hold that castle in his hand, right? How do I get this?
And on all those lines, but it's still there. He knows who this guy is, and he knows that I'm not going to use the word. He's a bit of a jester in the space, right? And
sure,
I mean, other people know it better, of course, but they know these things about each other, maybe even unconsciously, but they never directly say, "You're an idiot." They never directly say, "I don't like what you're thinking." Right? They wrap it up. They put it behind the 8 folds, as we say, right? And it's just delightful to listen to, and yeah, love that scene. Anyone else want to comment on that scene?
Just love it. That's a great line.
Yeah. How about you, Kristen?
I guess so. My backup was I sort of touched on it last week, and we've already sort of talked about it tonight too. But Kiri no Kata, I love the banter that she has with Toranaga when he comes in, and she says, I already said my favorite line, which was that I demand some respect before I should get some respect before I die. I'm an old lady. But I also like when he says something about her rump getting bigger, and she says in front of I don't know his name, that the character, the father-in-law of Mariko.
Hiromatsu.
Yes.
Hiromatsu, yeah.
So she says in front of Hiromatsu, now I need to shave my head and become a nun.
Yes. So I'm going to ask, I loved that scene as well. The banter was incredibly great. What exactly is her relationship to Toranaga? Just to make sure I'm clear.
Wife, right?
That's his wife. It's his wife.
Oh, was he? Yeah, because was she the wife? I thought she was the wife of the gentleman who passed away.
She's wife to Toranaga. Thank you, FX website.
I should have just gone to the website.
Yeah. It just says wife to Toranaga, and Kiri is a steadfast partner to the great warlord. The two have been close friends since Toranaga was a young hostage, their bond sustaining him through captivity. So
that's interesting context I did not know. Okay.
And
there's
what's
something
also interesting in that scene is the pregnant lady in that scene who is the mother of the next heir. And so that's an interesting part of the court as well, that is just sort of, she's sitting there and it's just sort of accepted that this woman is also now carrying the next child. And it's, I guess I've thought about that throughout like Western history and Western royalty, but I don't know much about Eastern, lots of ancient Eastern history. So that was an interesting thing for me to see that that was also something that was done in these courts as well.
Yeah, I
And
think I liked it too because I think it came later to like if the older woman is unable to give them the son, they resort to like a younger person to
Yeah.
like marry to the Lord and like they groom them to like your job is to get a heir to the
Mm.
king, otherwise all of
Yeah.
us will be in a position. So it kind of it was very interesting to see because in my mind I was also thinking like there will be some sort of jealousy or like some sort of
Yeah.
competition between the two women, but like instead of that they're basically like helping each other out and like telling them
Hmm.
what's their duty and what's your responsibility here to do. So it was pretty. I think Ochiba's
Yeah.
case was also similar here. So yeah, it was
Yeah.
pretty interesting
It's
for me.
interesting.
and
That's one
looking
thing. Go
forward a
ahead.
little bit, right? We sort of know the trajectory of Blackthorn and Mariko, Maria, and also the woman who becomes his wife is forced to, in a sense, and how historically it has been accepted and expected of important lords and most heads of household being men in general having wives and having consorts. That is an open truth that tended to be the case quite often. I don't know necessarily what the European equivalent might have been if there was one, but I do know that that has been culturally present in Japan and not so far in the past. In fact, I think
Mm.
there still has been, even in my lifetime, a culture of, well, you have your wife at home and then you have others that you can play around with in your free time, I suppose.
Don't get any ideas.
We may
Nope. Yep.
we may have to do a
I've got
whole
my
different
hands
show
full.
on the full-time wife escapist the
Oh,
show.
so good.
Oh
I love that
yeah,
show. I
brilliant.
love
The
that
themes
show.
there like addressing kind of that culture is totally in that
Hmm.
show. And
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah,
anyways.
I really like that part of that aspect of this show where they're just showing us this life. They're not explaining this life. They're letting it be what it is. And that
Mm.
lets you feel like those people. Like, like you said, Maisha, my feelings didn't necessarily line up at first. And then I saw how they were quote unquote feeling, which is good acting. And all right, let me sit in this. Let me watch this. Let me
Hmm.
see where it goes. And what I love, one of the things they're showing us here is the holistic collectivist cultural life. And for me, it's exciting to see. I mean, all I've ever really done is read about collectivist holist culture. And I'd be very interested in hearing what people in Japan feel about how their collectivist culture is being portrayed in the
Mhm.
show. Do they think it's being overdone so that the Western audience gets it? I don't know. Maybe we'll find a special guest to have him come on and tell us, well, we have people that are Japanese American here as well. At the same time, there might be a difference between how you guys are experiencing and how someone who's never really, you know, lived outside of Japan per se might be experiencing it.
Here's what I do know and what I will say. Back to the FX website again, specifically with this second episode, they have like per episode sort of a behind the scenes, and the second one is sort of following Hiroyuki Sanada around the set and everything that he did for the production. It's quite fascinating, and everyone's talking about how we don't know when he sleeps, but
Mm.
he's there during his scenes, gets out of his wig and costume and goes to the next set to consult on that one, and then is hopping on a call to consult on this next future scene, whatever it is. But he talks about how over the last 20 years of him doing Japanese pieces, as he says, in overseas, that he until now has sort of had to sort of choose his words and opportunities to chime in and offer his opinions, but now as a producer, he says, you know, he feels the freedom to express himself fully and freely. And that this is sort of a culmination of those 20 years of thinking, reflecting, philosophizing on what it means to bring Japanese culture and entertainment to Japan. And so I have a massive amount of respect for what he does and what he's doing in terms of forging this path, you know, for actors and Japanese representation in entertainment. Um, and it we've come a long way from Shogun, the first limited series, 1980. Which was, from what I found, generally reviled by Japanese viewers. And what I have found now is that many of the reviews have been positive. Now, I don't know how, you know, pervasive this show is yet in Japan in terms of its reach, if Japanese viewers are really, you know, going out of their way to watch it. But then again, I mean, I think Hiroyuki Sanada's a big enough name that some are, and reviews so far have been positive. Hideo Kojima of video game design fame seems to like it, and that's a pretty big thumb up, I think. Yeah.
You did ask your sister though if she has seen things
I
around,
asked
and yeah.
my to arasa is the word in Japanese, around 30, sister, who said she hasn't really heard anything about it, but you know, that is my one singular sample size.
Who lives in Japan?
Who lives in
We didn't say
Japan.
that. Yeah.
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 Well,
that's
yeah, I mean, I'm very delighted to hear that level of commitment on the part of, you know, reflecting, representing culture, simply because I find it fascinating, period. I think what I'm going to do is tell you my favorite line. And then I'll tell you the nerd hole I jumped in.
Can't wait.
Love it.
Because it's not a poetic line. But it's a historic line that they could have completely avoided and didn't. And it's at the beginning when the Taiko's dying. And he says to Toranaga, I wish we could have taken Korea.
Mm.
Then I could have given you Japan. They didn't need to put that line in there, right?
Mhm.
The scale of it. The scale of it.
Yeah.
Why did they put that in there? Well, fun, as Tatsu's saying, it's about scale. And it's also about making sure that we take this show seriously. I mean, these guys, you know, and then of course, what do? I go down a nerd rabbit hole. I mean, and I look at what does that like? Japan, Korea. And I will admit I've studied my share of military history, usually involved in Europe. I'll be straight up, that's what I've done. And so I looked at, you know, the Japanese invasion of Korea in the 16th century, right? And anyway, I won't go into what I discovered there. But they didn't need to show that. They didn't need to say that unless they didn't want the show to just become one-sided. Militaries only come from one part of the world. Conquering only comes from one part of the world. I just have a terrible amount of respect for that kind of honesty. It makes all the scenes that much more risky. They make you know what's at stake. This is the class of people in this world that lead those kinds of things. And what you're seeing is the life of that class, mixed in with, of course, others. So I absolutely love that they put that line in there. And like I said, I'll talk later about other details that came up in the nerd world, because it relates to my favorite scene later. But did anyone else that line just go by for everyone else, or did it stick out to anyone?
Uh, I mean, like, I think there is a parallel between when I think it happened in this episode. I saw the episode quite a while ago, but I think it happened in this episode when the Portuguese told Toranaga, or Toranaga found out that Portuguese thinks that Japan belongs to them. So
Yeah.
that sort of thing. And here, Tycho
Yes.
telling them like, "Oh, I wish we could have taken Korea." I think it kind of parallels that both the countries kind of like thinks the other different country is kind of belongs to them and they can like take over whenever they want to.
Yeah.
So that was kind of
Mhm.
like I found pretty fascinating that they did that parallel in the same episode.
Absolutely. Greed and power grabs do not just happen in very specific places. They happen in very high places all over the world.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think it
Okay.
also sort of contextualizes us in terms of where we are in Japanese history. So,
Mhm.
Japanese history has a lot of wars and has a lot of peace, and then it has a war and then it has peace. Um, we are sort of at the tail end of a peaceful period where we've had the Korean War fairly longer ago, and then had this period of peace under the Taiko, and then we're about to have, I believe it's the Battle of Sekigahara that they're sort of like referencing is coming, and so in the local level we have that's been happening, and like you're saying, Scott, it also gives us a global context of like, yes, Japan tried to go for Korea at that time, and then we have the scene with Father Domingo in the jail cell where he's talking about, oh, the Chinese hate Japan. So what the Portuguese are doing now, they're trading exclusively through Japan. It's usury, so on. And then now they have these secret bases in Macau with Japanese soldiers. And then Maisha, that scene that you're talking about where Blackthorn draws out the line
Yeah.
and Toranaga's
Mm-hmm.
reaction to being told that Japan belongs to Portugal. And he's like,
Yeah.
they said that.
Said belongs.
all right.
Said
And of course,
belongs.
the little kid on
Challenge
the side,
accepted.
he's like,
Yeah.
that's ridiculous. It's war. And he's like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
shut up.
Calm
Yeah.
The
down.
adults are
Quiet.
talking.
Yeah.
Well, I got to tell you,
Yeah.
Maisha, you went directly to my favorite scene
Mhm.
because it relates back to
Great
my
scene.
favorite line because this is I'm going to use the word Game of Thrones, and that's probably somewhat of an insult, but one of the things that Game of Thrones that did well was scheming, conniving, making plans that have long-term multi-scale impacts on a lot of people. And that whole scene was absolutely brilliant. Not only was it good for us to situate the space, but I wanted to know Macau. Where the hell's Macau? What do you mean? So I went down a nerd hole. I went to find out where Macau is, what the role
I
that
did
it
the same thing.
played.
Missouri. Yeah.
And okay, so I'm gonna go a little on the limb here, but you see, the reason from the readings I've done, the reason that Japan was not successful in taking Korea was China's ability to bring massive numbers of troops that Japan simply couldn't deal with, much in the same way World War One ended because the Americans were able to bring massive amounts of troops to France that the Germans couldn't compete with. There's just too many, and you couldn't attack supply lines because of. So on the one hand, Scott's sitting here talking military history. At the same time, it's the same kind of phenomenon, different time. Separated by centuries, but it's still the same transformation of energy in multi-scale ways. And I absolutely thought it was brilliantly written to the point where I could then jump off and go to the internet and find out what I wasn't getting from the show. And man, that's just good public education. This is more than just this multimedia world didn't exist 20 years ago. I couldn't have gone to my computer and found those scholarly papers. It's absolutely fantastic.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And they weren't telling these stories 20 years ago. I mean, 30 years ago, they did the version of Shogun. Like, that is what it is. If you watch the trailer, you'll know what I'm
We
talking
watched the
about.
trailer. It's so funny.
but
If
I
you want
mean,
a treat, go watch the trailer of the 1980s Shogun.
growing up with an American education system, we don't learn about any other ancient histories besides we'll learn about Mesopotamia and the Byzantine
Egypt.
era and in Egypt and that, but we don't learn about ancient Asian history. We don't learn about ancient, even South
Middle
American
Eastern history
or
and
Middle
African
Eastern or
history.
African, yeah, at all. And
No.
we learn about European. And so it's really interesting to see this. And it's great that we do have these resources now that we can start to dig in when you're like, oh, I have no idea what they're talking about. What are they? Oh, wow, this is incredible. I'm learning so much now. So it is a wonderful educational experience as well, at least for
Yeah, I
me.
was very happy, grateful nerd this afternoon, sitting on my own, going merry, reading a paper about Japanese history. It was and I'll talk about this more as we go through the show because Toranaga's acting, the character,
Yeah.
just knowing
Mm-hmm.
all the depths that are being addressed by every action and statement in every moment and carrying himself that way.
Mm-hmm.
You go
Yeah.
back, this is the show, you could watch it 4 times and you'll still pick up different levels, different layers, and different statements at different times. So, yeah,
Yep.
that was my favorite.
Yeah.
I'll pass it on to someone else.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I don't know if I necessarily have a favorite scene of this episode. It's all very good, like you're saying, Sky. They're letting them live, right? They're just you're just in the moment. But the theme that I pull out of it, right, is that this episode's all about the Toranaga recon, right? He's doing his recon very, very specifically. He doesn't do a whole lot except for listen, right? He doesn't ask a lot of people for himself. He's like, tell me about you, like and it's just so good, like we've talked about throughout today, but just the depth of the questions that he's asking. He's already thinking 2 steps ahead, right? We start to get a glimpse of the tactician that is Toranaga, and how other people are kind of stuck at different levels. You can see it in their face, right? So the scene that we're talking about, where he learns about what the Portuguese are actually doing, it peers over to Yabushige, and he's kind of like, this is bad, but why? And he's like, well, this is also very lucrative. How can I take advantage of this? So his mind's elsewhere, but Toranaga gets it on all fronts. And that's why I think the first scene is so significant, right? It means a lot. Where basically, I don't know if Taiko dies after that scene or what, but basically the last 2 people that he wants to talk to make sure that I get my will across to is Toranaga and his heir, right? And he excuses his heir to talk to Toranaga. So you get exactly who this guy is. They peer to the his uniform that's presented of his ancestors, right? The power of it, the way people speak of it. So yeah, this is really setting up Toranaga in this one.
And
I gotta jump in. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just gonna point out that the armor that you're pointing out of the Taikos is historically accurate to a degree. Hideyoshi was known for that sunburst helmet in his armor. Yeah, and then it's sort of interesting how each of them now have their own like representative armor, right? We see Toranaga's that I think Blackthorn is like, so that's Toranaga's armor. And then Mariko sort of explains its influence and what it was based on. And Ishido has his armor, and that has its own look and history behind it. I mean, we haven't even gotten into katanas yet. Like,
and they've both referenced it too at moments of indecision, which is interesting too. They're both like back at.
Tatsu, you brought that first scene back up, and one of the things I noticed watching it again was Taiko asks Toranaga, "Hey, would you please take my son, and I'll name you this?" And he says, "Oh yeah," and then they'll kill me, they'll kill your kid. No, let's not do that. Okay, so that happens, and then a piece of paper comes out
appears
where he's naming the Board of Regents. Now, in other words, the first question was simply a test.
He already knew.
If
He
you
already
say
knew.
yes,
And
if
he
you say
passed.
yes, you're not going to, we're not going to
Right.
do it. But I just thought, okay, so he's just as smart, you know,
Yeah.
as a guy who's
And
asking
the
questions.
funny thing is,
on his
Toranaga is
deathbed.
like casually like, oh, you are the smartest person in the whole of the land, sire. You know, like they're messing with each other,
Oh,
right?
totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
That's
And just
when
you
we
have to
get the
be
line.
really, really smart to be able
Yeah.
to write that well. You really have to be smart to be able to just let that level of nuance float around. And I bet you they had an unbelievably fun time acting that stuff out.
Yeah.
Just imagine how fun it was, right? All right, I'll shut up. I just love that front scene.
Well,
man.
you know, Kristen knows we always say acting is reacting. The best actors are the best listeners, and
Yeah.
so it is incredible to watch Sanada act, and that's another thing that came up in the video too. Everyone is like he's just a force, and I think everyone's just here for the honor to work with, you know, Hiro Sanada. It's pretty incredible.
Okay, then. Kristen, did I skip over you when I talked about my scene? Did you have a scene that you wanted to toss? Okay.
No, we talked about the scene, remember, with the Hirinokata and
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And the rump.
Yeah, Marsha mentioned the showing the map of the world scene, and I kind of lost my mind because
no.
it was so good.
I mean, there were some really good scenes in this episode, so
good.
it's easy to get
All
lost.
right,
We
who
haven't
else
even gotten
wants
to the last scene.
Who else wants to talk about a favorite line, favorite scene? How about you, Maisha? Go ahead,
go ahead,
Todd.
Maisha. I was just gonna say, just for some lightheartedness, at well, not towards the end of that first scene, but in the interim, I loved when I forget the Lord's name, the Christian. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's the Ochiba line, right? Well, so like the father is
So
talking
good.
to the guy.
Yeah,
it's like,
the
oh,
Jesuit,
like
whatever
if he doesn't take the sacrament, you know, he's gonna be what is
He's
it?
going to hell.
Damn to hell.
Oh, he's going to hell, pretty much. And Ochiba Kata just walks by and she says, or maybe God's kingdom is up your own ass.
You ever think about that? Like,
you ever think about that?
Deadpan. She's like, maybe it could be found up your ass.
Yes. That defines her character. 80% done. Brother work is done. All of this elegant parlance.
The subtleties of the women in this also is so good. The scene where after Mariko goes the first time to translate, and then she goes and she's sitting with her husband and her son, and the father-in-law comes in and he says, "Oh, he's called another meeting," and he goes, the son gets up, and he's like, "Not you."
Oops.
Oops. Yeah. And she's just like, hey, yes, I'm important. I'm smart.
Well, I think maybe that's a good segue into the title of the episode, which I think is kind of significant and gives us a lot to think about. But
did Maisha talk about her favorite scene?
No.
Go for it.
Not
Before I railroad us into the next.
It's all good.
Well, my favorite scene was actually the map one, because I was trying to remember if it was in this episode or the next episode, but when I was like, okay, that's probably my favorite episode, but we already talked about that. I just wanted to briefly mention that how I liked Mariko in this episode. I felt like Mariko had a larger influence in the story than the first episode here, and we got to see that her struggle between like her god, like because she like serves to a Catholic god, but Toranaga, who's not a Catholic, asked him to be a translator for Blackthorn, who's a Protestant. So like I think Mariko herself was like going through a lot of like internal struggle, although because she's a Japanese woman, she doesn't show emotions, and she's such a good actor. You cannot tell her that like she's like accepting it because it's her lord who's like ordering her to do that, and she cannot refuse it, and she has a better purpose. She wants to have a purpose in her life. At the same time, she also like kind of having a conflict that like what the Catholics will do, because she does translate for the Catholic priest that she goes to and everything. So as Rio was mentioning the servants of two masters thing, I think that's
Really
basically
nice segue.
Lady Mariko's
Yeah.
thing is like definitely goes
Yes.
with that. Like she serves two gods, she serves the Catholic here, and she also serves Toranaga. So I think that's also kind of a getaway to what you were going for after that one.
100%. And before I do, though, I feel like I have to point out that it's very clear that Mariko has a little bit more going on under the
Yeah.
surface than
Yeah.
a lot of the other characters, and that like she does speak out, not to Toranaga, but to Blackthorn.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's very inappropriate for a woman to speak out of turn in that culture, and for her to say, I disagree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
You're wrong. You're lying.
I'm also very interested to see what her dark thoughts are, or whatever the priest referred to.
I think they flashed something about the death of her either previous husband or father or something.
Well,
I think father.
we might have discussed this in the last episode, or we personally might have discussed this about how possibly she became a Catholic when her father died, and how was that almost like a predatory thing that they kind of jumped in on while she was feeling low, and so I can't wait to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I think Toranaga sees that she's different too. I think he sees it quickly, and he instantly says, I think he almost created a reason for her to have another meeting with her as well. Because the stuff he saw at that meeting, by the way, this belongs to Portugal, right? It just, what the hell? I've got to get more now. And I want to see how she interacts in these environments more, because I need some real players here. I can't have some of the fools there. I got to have real players who can keep up and keep the nuance going. And he never says it to her. I just love, that level of nuance. Yeah.
I mean, and I mean, we've talked already about sort of Toranaga's strategy, the tactician that he is, with his back against the wall, with the other four regents saying, yeah, we're basically just biding our time until we can oust you and probably kill you. Meanwhile, he's already playing these games, set in these places, picking his pieces to put in place, and they're all oddballs, obviously, because we need the movers and the shakers to cause a riot. But anyway, servants of two masters, and that's a phrase that we've heard outside of this context, and I believe it's a singular servant of two masters, but the title of the episode is Servants, plural, of two masters, and it is clearly referring to multiple servants to multiple masters. I think that we very clearly, if you're watching the Blackthorn through line, he has his allegiance to his country, but now he's becoming embroiled in this political intrigue that makes him a servant to new masters, and everyone who is anyone in Japan it looks down on him as this barbarian, and he's either property or an enemy or both. And Inu, yeah, that scene that we haven't even mentioned, another great scene where Yabushige ambushes the procession. That scene. Oh, look at you! You're a good dog. Learn some words. Let me teach you something. Ora wa inu da, meaning I am a dog. I mean, I guess it translates there. And he's like, good dog. You want a good master. All right, come with me.
He just needs a good master. That's what he says.
But again, another servant of two masters. Yabushige is playing both sides.
Yeah.
Toranaga and Ishido. We don't know where he lies yet. And Mariko, we've talked about how she is serving in her faith in a Christian God, but also obviously a Japanese woman. We could consider her husband to be a master, but clearly she has little to no authority. He acts like it, but we can see that his desperation for trying to have that control.
Yeah.
makes him the least powerful of the men we've seen so far. And then finally, sort of on a global scale, right now, Japan looks like it's a servant to these two masters of Spain and Portugal, who apparently just are splitting up the Eastern world.
Yep.
Well, also, I think Alvito is possibly a servant of two masters as well.
Yeah.
I think I think that there's a little bit more. I think he's, first of all, in love with Mariko,
Yes.
number one. So he's a servant to her. But I think I think he has a very strong intentions to be a servant of God. But he is also serving the people that are there that he knows are doing things that are not godly. And so I find him very interesting. And I think he's going to be torn in many different directions, or at least I hope he is over time. Well, I mean, it would be interesting.
He's also one of the best Japanese speakers of the non-Japanese people.
Yeah. It's the way he like kind of carries the conversation, because like in the other scenes, it's very apparent. Like, they say a few words that you probably string together if you practice it enough, right?
Yeah.
But the way that he's kind of gesturing, and
he worked. He either worked with a coach or he was already studying Japanese, and that's part of the reason why he got this role.
Yeah,
totally.
He's a British actor, but I didn't see anything about him knowing Japanese. So,
I mean, he could be doing Duolingo on the side.
All the things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyone else a favorite scene, favorite line, favorite character?
I mean, the last scene, the assassination. Anyone?
So good.
It's kind of funny how we have the most to say about the more quiet and somber scenes as opposed to the big actiony scenes like the bandit raid or the assassination at the end. But even the assassination has some like plot implications and also highlights Toranaga again as a tactician. He was like, this proved to us that they came to kill not me, but John Blackthorne.
Yeah. Well, just so we're all clear, the Shogun Watch Party is made up of people who are looking for something better, something more sophisticated and nuanced. And we do want to see all these layers forcibly presented through moments, right? It has to be presented through moments, yet in those moments, everything is there if you can pick up on it and if you pay attention. And that's definitely what I'm looking for. I do think, they're talking about season 2 and season 3, and ouch. Of course I'll watch, but some things are just so good. I feel you just let it be.
We've only watched 1 and 2, so we don't know how this season ends.
Yeah, we're going episode by episode as we discuss it. So but I do know. Yeah,
I was so tempted to say episode 10 line. I won't. But I mean, they're already in contract for season 2 and 3, and I don't know, man. Of course, like I said, I'll watch it, but sometimes something's so good, it's so right, so coherent at every level, you just want to let it be. Yeah, but we'll see.
I'm trying to think of another show recently that we thought was really good and
Yellow
completed.
Jackets.
No,
it didn't complete though.
It completed what was written of the book. Oh man, if I think of it, I'll let you know. But
we did watch something.
It's been slated
recently.
for more seasons, even though there's not written material for it.
Alice in Borderland. We liked season 1.
Maybe that's what it is. I mean,
there's more seasons to that?
There's season 3 coming out.
Season 3.
It's confirmed that a new season is coming.
I really
I'm gonna
admired
watch
that
it,
story's ending. Yeah.
Well, technically,
right?
there is more material, although I don't think that they're basing it on that. I think that Arisu will be a part of the new season because there's Alice in Border Road, which was a different.
It's gonna be
manga.
like. It's gonna
just
be
like The Walking Dead. I was gonna say like Walking Dead, the other seasons.
But
the
you don't. Yeah, well, that's like any show, but like Battle Royale is very much like kind of in the same realm. and
Mm.
you don't really remember like the second, or was there a third? I don't
I
know.
mean, there
But
was
I
a,
know
Oh,
a
there were
I've
different
only
second. There
stories.
might have been a
I only
spin-off,
saw the
but
first one.
Mm.
I only saw the first one.
don't
A lot.
bother.
I think
Don't.
there was a yeah
There was a
sequel,
second film,
but
and they
who
sort of
And
remembers
ran
it?
out of
Yeah.
funding. It
and Rio and
was,
I have
yeah.
cosplayed as Battle Royale.
You
If
have.
Yeah.
if
Absolutely.
you caught us
Yeah,
at conventions in
yeah,
2023, yes, we were
yeah,
cosplaying as
yeah.
this is
They're good.
roughly
They're pretty good.
battle royale characters. We were
Well,
definitely
yeah.
students
With the binoculars,
at
you had
Castle Rock
the
Junior
yeah.
High. Yes, had
Yeah, a
the
lot
pot
of people
lid.
think
Hmm.
say that Deadwood season 3, that the end of Deadwood was not good, and I completely disagree. If you've ever seen the end of Deadwood, it's the fight that didn't happen that matters,
Hmm.
right? It's the
Hmm.
fight that
Hmm.
didn't happen that matters, and everybody walking around looking for a fight, and it doesn't happen, and they all feel like chumps, and you feel it, and it's desperate. That's just brilliant. You got to do a lot of work to get anyway. So
Hmm.
what I was saying is I have seen the whole season. This is one of the most coherent things I've seen put out, and I just don't want it to get tarnished because
Hmm.
it's so.
Did it end where the book ends, or is there just more to the story, or are
I
they
don't
just
know.
adding more? Because like Handmaid's Tale, that is
Yeah.
something that basically the first season or first and second season are basically the book, and then it
Mm,
continues on. And they've done a pretty good job,
yeah.
but I wonder if it's something like that. Like if but Margaret Atwood, who was the author, continued on and
Yeah.
continued to write with them. So um I
Yeah.
wonder if that's something that will happen here or if it is a continuation. I don't
They
know.
do have as one of the executive producers a relative spouse child of James Clavell, Michaela
Oh,
Clavell. I
he's
haven't looked into.
passed.
I'm not sure.
Mm,
Honestly,
Oh,
I haven't
okay.
looked a ton into James
mm,
Clavell lately, only because I feel like it's so far removed from the original work, really, what we're watching now.
Hmm.
And he has passed away uh
mm.
back in 1994.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, family member, Michaela, I'm assuming shares the name. That can't be a
So
coincidence.
Rio, you
But
I mean,
mentioned the
yeah.
fun. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying that that sort of tells me, because this show clearly is trying to take all the right steps and do all the right things. Oh, child, Michaela Clavel. I wouldn't be surprised if that is sort of like, making sure they at least have sort of spiritual license to continue on. Now, that said, Clavel wrote, I think, Taipei and Macau, which were
oh.
other like big brick novels similar to Shogun. I don't
Do
Hmm.
think
they
that's
have
where this show's gonna go,
okay, I
but
was gonna say, do they have any sort of like through line or like, you know,
I
some
think
sort of character that goes through all of them?
they're connected in historical context. I believe I haven't read them, so I
Mm.
don't know exactly. I've only read Shogun, but I wouldn't be surprised if they sort of take place in the same rough area of history around the same time. Because
I mean,
as we
it'd be
know, Macau
interesting.
is heavily involved
Yeah, I was gonna say that'd be
in what
interesting to
we're talking
see
about.
that side.
Yeah, and as
Hmm.
long as the same crew's involved, I mean, showrunners, producers
Oh,
who
it
were
wasn't
on set
Macau.
completely matter. You could just ruin a story if you get
Oh,
someone who doesn't have the coherent
absolutely.
vision in charge of everything. So if they can
So
put it together, go
He
ahead.
was
oh,
he was supposed
I just found it's a saga of six novels.
Mm,
oh,
Yeah, starting with King Rat, which is about a Japanese POW camp in Singapore in 1945. And then we jump around to Taipan in 1846, jump all the way back to 1600s with Shogun, and then
oh.
jump forward again, Noble House, set in Hong Kong in 1963, Whirlwind in Iran in 1979, and then Gaijin again in Japan, but in 1862. So I guess not in the same historical context at all. Just the Asian saga, apparently,
mm.
uh, is what.
Interesting. What
Mhm.
year what year is Iran?
So Iran in 1979.
So that's during the revolution and the Ayatollah taking over,
Called
right? If I'm
Whirlwind.
correct.
Yeah,
Interesting. Okay.
written in
Huh.
1986. Yeah.
Okay. Huh.
hmm
Maybe that's
Cold.
after. Maybe was it 70s? Was 70s? I
No, it's
wasn't born.
the
Was it the 80s?
well, Jimmy Carter, the Iranian hostage crisis was during Carter's administration in the late 70s.
Those 70s. Yeah, okay. So that makes sense.
Surrounding the fall of the Iranian monarchy and the rise of the Ayatollah Khomeini.
Yep.
Okay. Because I have a friend whose father
Yeah.
escaped during that time. So
So it's
that's an
yeah. Sounds like the author likes to write about the dynamics of empire,
hmm
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And tracing it through. Fantastic. All right,
Yeah.
then. You mentioned the assassination scene. Is there something else you wanted to say about it? Because I thought it was, I'm just going to say cool as hell. I hope that doesn't get me canceled anywhere, but it was well done. And it's
Very
interesting that the assassin knows how to be an assassin, right? And so
hmm
the choreography was done such that no one else in the space stood a chance as long as this person could be in the shadows, right? I just thought that that was
she
awesome.
was she was great. I
Yep.
loved her
hmm
death. I love a
Yeah.
good death. Her death was great. Also, I'm embarrassed to say, but I feel like I need to say that I had to watch the show a second time to know that they were trying to come for Blackthorn. I
Mm.
don't know how I missed it the first time. I must have been like also scrolling through Instagram or something. This is why I watch things twice because when
Mm.
Rio and I rewatched it, I looked at him and I went, I didn't realize they were coming for Blackthorn the first time. I'm glad I
Well,
rewatched it.
sitting here talking about it in the midst of all that intense combat violence, this is another moment where our two leads actually bond more, right?
hmm
He gets the
Mhm.
um Toranaga defends Blackthorn, saves his life
hmm
twice, if I'm not mistaken, blocking various thrusts and stuff.
hmm
And then they both sit there and watch her die.
Yeah.
Um,
And Blackthorn saves
yes,
Toranaga's life too. He goes after her. He
yeah,
goes after her.
Mhm.
So
hmm
I think that that's definitely a trust building
yes.
moment too.
I don't advise that for corporate, corporate get-togethers, but that kind
Feet
of
away
thing is a
assassin.
bonding exercise. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what we should say is that these action scenes, what you were saying, Scott, earlier about how it's a collection of moments that
Mm,
build to these big, exciting climaxes. And in
yeah.
this show so far, they are earned. Like, especially I think this episode, like
Word.
it builds to and it's appropriate. Where if you
Yep.
have just sex violence, you become desensitized to it. Whereas
Yep.
if it's earned, like it's building up anticipation, or it's shocking, but with a great deal of value in terms of character building
Yeah.
or narrative progress. And just badass moments like Toranaga, just
Yes.
like the final move pushing her over the edge.
Your use of the phrase
Into
earned.
into the
Your,
same sand that they just drew all those lines in and drew the
Yeah,
world.
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
just
right.
very interesting, and also what the opening credits are, which the
Yeah.
first episode I'm like, why is it sand? And then second episode I'm like,
Mm.
oh,
You
duh,
get it.
okay.
And your
Now I
use
now
of
I
the word
understand.
earned is the exact phrase I often use when, it's like for me, it's if you're going to write a scientific paper and you're going to use any flowery language in it, you use it at the end when you've earned the right to be a bit poetic, right? You don't use it in the middle because it loses its depth and punch. You do
Mm,
all the boring analytic stuff, get it all done. In the last sentence, you say a few things like the greatest trick, the greatest trick evolution ever pulled was convincing us the physical world exists. That's a line I ended a paper with 20 years ago, but after I'd done all the
Great line.
boring
yeah.
analytic philosophical work,
Great line.
and Usual Suspects is one of the best movies ever made, as far as I'm concerned. So stole it right from Usual Suspects. All right. Any final words or comments about this episode?
I'm intrigued. Can't wait to see more.
No, absolutely. It's such a thrill to watch again. Like, for example, we discussed that opening scene, which is like 2.5 minutes long. We discussed it for longer than the scene is, because if you don't pay attention, you miss the mental games that are being played in real time. And as Tatsu mentioned, Taiko's playing it delightfully. There's some of the
all on his back.
Yeah, exactly. All on his back,
All
about to
on
die. Just brilliant stuff.
Woe is me, but remember to do these things. I told you so.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you do the first one, I'm not going to
Pretty
eventually
women.
do the first one. Exactly. All right, then. So why don't we go ahead and let everybody know where they can find us on social media, and we'll start with Kristen.
You can find me at Fun-Sized Feral on Instagram, or if you're looking to buy or sell real estate, you can find me at Kristen Farrell Realtor.
Fantastic. How about you, Tatsu?
Just like last time, you can find me on LinkedIn, Tatsuya Shigeta, PhD, or T-T-Shigeta.
That's all right. You say that once again, so they get it.
T-T-Shigeta.
All right, then. Fantastic. How about you, Rio?
I may have improved upon the SEO there and just made it I know Rio. I'm on most socials but barely post. If you find me, you can give me crap about how little I post. You can criticize the posts that I do make. That'll be fun.
Fantastic.
I know Rio.
How about you, Maisha?
Well, I'm in the similar boat at Tatsu. You can find me on LinkedIn, and my name is like the way it's pronounced. It's spelled here. That's what my LinkedIn profile is. So.
Yeah, these two are assassins in training. We know what's going on here. Keep
Shinobi,
down
yeah.
low.
And meanwhile, you can find me everywhere.
You can find all episodes of the Shogun Watch Party at Dark Loops Productions on YouTube. They're also being posted as audio podcasts. You can find Apple wherever you find good podcasts. You can also look at our Facebook page on Dark Loops Productions. Leave comments there. Leave them on YouTube. If you want to write it to darkloopsproductions@gmail.com. We'll be sure to read it at the end of our next podcast. If you guys give me just a second, we actually did get one comment on our YouTube video this week. So I told people we'd read them, so I'm gonna. It says, so Min Monty Miller is actually a dear friend. I know her through a group called Sister Speak Productions. And she says, love, love, love this series. Excited for season 2. Thank you for reviewing the show. So we are doing a public service. Thanks to all of you for being here. So there it is. From all of us to all of you, big hugs. And remember,
Shogun Kantai. Ora wa inu ja.
ありがとうございました。
bye-bye.
ありがとうございます。
バイバイ。
おやすみなさい。